Hello, everybody. It's me, Fee, White Zulu, and I want to welcome you to another chapter of, another chapter of Okavango Diary. And I hope you're enjoying these readings. I want to welcome you all. And if you are enjoying them, please share or press the like button or whatever people do if they want to. I'm sorry, I'm a bit Diomaka today. I haven't got any words in front of me to read, so I'm doing this off the cuff. However, this is a greeting to you all and a welcome, and I hope that you enjoy these chapters that I'm reading out. They go out twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays, if all goes well. And enjoy them, and thank you so much for listening to them. Share them around. Thank you, and goodbye.
I climbed aboard the little four-seater Cessna and sat in the front passenger seat, resting my burning forehead against the cool perspex of the window as we took off. I watched the scenery below me. The sun glinted off the twisting trails, now filled with water, so there was just the odd papyrus islands jutting out of the swamps of the delta. I saw a big breeding herd of elephants splashing along one of the trails, headed for an island. A giraffe strolling serenely through the reeds, and herds of buffalo were also wading and grazing at the same time. I wished I had felt a lot better and had been able to enjoy this amazing game viewing. But all I really longed for was to sink into a bed and rest my feverish head against a cool pillow again. We landed in Maun, and I sat in the shade under the wing as Boyson loaded some fresh produce, eggs, and several cases of beer into the cargo hold. He then handed the pilot the post bag for Tsaro, after which I got into the old stallion, Bucky with him, and we rattled off into town and stopped at the head office corrugated iron shed, which served, apart from our head office, as well as a place to store dry, non-perishable goods for the two camps. There were 4 desks, each with a large computer on it, and young women sitting there taking bookings. Although I'd met some of them the previous time when I'd come down to get my paperwork sorted, now nobody there greeted me, nor even turned her head in my direction. I didn't know any members of the staff by name, apart from Patricia and Yvonne, and the former came up to me and said that there was a doctor's appointment made for me at 3 o'clock, and I was to wait in the corner of the office. I lay down on the cool floor of the office, using my overnight bag as a pillow, and shut my burning eyes. I was longing for a drink of water, or even better, Lucozade, but nobody spoke to me, nor came near me, let alone offered me anything. It was so very disheartening. I felt like a pariah dog, and I had no idea what the BFH had been saying about me to elicit this icy response from the rest of what should have been my colleagues. Time again dragged by very slowly until Pauline called me and told me to get into Patricia, and told me to get into the stallion again. Boyson took me into the town centre to a concrete building which boasted a doctor's brass plate. There I went in to see a plump Botswana man in a white coat, seated at a huge desk, his neck's in folds at the back, like our politicians have, beaming at me. "I see you are Mrs. Whitsitt," he said. My heart sank. I knew that my ex-husband had spent some time in Maun working at the Barclays Bank there, having fled all his creditors and the banks and building societies he'd borrowed money from, and leaving me and our 2 boys homeless, penniless, and seriously ill and bedridden in my case. Somehow he'd managed to inveigle himself a job as a manager in the tiny Barclays Bank in Maun, and had spent several months there before he went on to Francistown, a slightly bigger place also in Botswana. If he'd gone back to South Africa, he would have been arrested for running up debts to the tune of 60,000 rand in 1991 when I divorced him, which was a substantial amount of money in those days. But that's another story. "Are you related to Mr. George Whitsitt?" he inquired, and I cautiously replied that he was my ex-husband. The ex part passed the doctor straight by, as he began to elaborate on how generous Mr. Whitsitt had been in advancing him loans to expand his practice. Apparently they were also drinking buddies at the Duck Inn. This did not bode well at all, and eventually I had to stop him in mid-boast to tell him why I was there. He did nothing, didn't take my pulse, check my temperature, or do a blood pressure test, but pulled out a bottle and proceeded to fill it with large, yellowish pills with his bare hands. And the pills were big enough to look as though they were for veterinary purposes. He told me they were antibiotics and that they would fix me straight away, and then tried to steer the conversation back to his best buddy, my ex-husband. I was having none of it, and I thanked him and went out as fast as I could stagger to the stallion, in which we then rattled out to that desolate half-built farm, where Boyson told me to go into the house. Apparently there was now another bedroom near completion, and a bed had been made up there by the woman who worked as a maid by this time. I was sorry that I hadn't asked him to stop to allow me to buy some cold drinks and some Lucozade, because there was nothing for me at the farm other than tap water again. I flopped gratefully into the bed and began my course of antibiotics. Unfortunately, the pills were so large, bitter and chalky that they stuck in my throat, causing me to gag, and I threw them up again. Eventually, as it got dark and the cacophony outside began of the livestock being brought down to drink, Yvonne arrived back. "We're having a braai at Patricia's. Do you want to come along and lie on a spare bed rather than stay here on your own?" I accepted this invitation, as it meant I would probably get something to drink there, like Coke or Fanta or anything that would quench my thirst and allow me to try the antibiotics again. She drove us at breakneck speed into a suburb, which consisted of dry baked earth and the most basic houses built from what looked like asbestos, with corrugated iron roofs. She turned into the gates of one of these and parked. There was a group of people sitting around an open fire, and some of them were grilling their meat on it, using racks with handles so they could turn them every now and again. I stumbled into the spare room, accepted a glass of Coke gratefully, and tried another antibiotic pill, which stayed down this time. I lay there listening to them, all chatting and laughing outside. Yvonne came in again and asked if I would like to come and join them. I accepted, grateful now that they hadn't turned their backs on me, as they had done in the office. I sat on a deck chair in the circle and listened to the conversation, which was mostly stories they were telling of their own experiences working in the 2 camps. Someone thrust a full tumbler into my hand, and thinking that it was a refill of the Coke, I took a large gulp, only then realizing that it was neat whiskey. I almost threw up, but used all my willpower to prevent it. I quietly put the glass under my chair and carried on listening to their stories. Sadly, I can't even recall one of them. Some of them were making me laugh out loud at their outrageousness. Eventually, it was time to go home, and Yvonne drove me back. I undressed, sank gratefully in between my cool sheets, and fell asleep. I was woken almost immediately by a rat gnawing through the base of my bed. I thumped the mattress. The disturbing gnawing stopped and I fell asleep again. This carried on the whole night. I was so exhausted that I thumped the mattress almost in my sleep, just to get the grating noise to stop briefly, worried now that the rodent was getting very close to where my head lay. I imagined the next thing it would be chewing on would be my ear, it was so close. Yvonne had told me that was the reason she'd got a cat, but even it became so satiated with rats that often it would lie on her bed while they gnawed through the base and not move a whisker. Dawn broke with the starlings squabbling in the fruit tree, and I was feeling as ill as ever. I was back to tap water, and the antibiotics were just not staying down. At about 8 that morning, after Yvonne had gone without so much as an offer of coffee, tea, or anything, Boyson arrived again, this time to take me back to the airport to catch a plane back to Kugana. Apparently, having seen the doctor, he had told them I was well enough to go back to work. I climbed into the little aircraft and we took off. Just as we were out of Maun, I heard the radio crackling through the pilot's headset. He looked across at me and said, "No, she's sitting right beside me." I was extremely puzzled now. I didn't know him at all. Otherwise, I would have asked him what was going on. We flew into Kugana and I was collected by boat again. I reported back to the office, still swaying dizzily and half blind from the headache. The BFH looked me over and said, "Well, you'd better go and get into your uniform and get back to your job then. The doctor said there was nothing wrong with you, but he gave you some antibiotics just in case, and you should be better by now." I was stunned. The doctor had not examined me at all, but thrust these horse pills into my hand and dismissed me. If he'd taken my temperature, he would have found out that I was running a fever, and even if he'd taken my pulse, he would have found there was something wrong, as it was still racing and I had palpitations. I dragged myself weakly back to my room, changed, and stumbled towards the bar to try and get drinks ready for the lunchtime rush. Somehow I managed to drag myself through the day's chores, and it was lucky that our guests wanted an early night, as they were getting up for the 5 o'clock early morning game viewing excursion. There was no sign of Kira, and I heard through one of the African staff that she had flown back to Maun head office that morning.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to my videos and my stories of my life. And I want to thank John Moslane for being what I call the sound engineer, but I'm sure there's a more professional word for it. However, faithful, and for 4 years now, I think, he has been here for me every Wednesday. Well, I think it's Wednesdays, but once a week to record 2 chapters of whichever book it is I'm reading. And without him, this couldn't be done. So a big thank you to John. Also, Sean van Vuren, we send the videos to him. Sorry, I'm not reading this. I'm just doing it off the cuff. And my brain is a bit Jumaka. And Sean uploads them to the YouTube channel where you can find them all in playlists. He does it beautifully. And I want to thank them both for all the help that they give me. Well, it's not help. They do everything for me. And it's a great asset. So also, I have a website called whitezulubook.com, obviously www in front of it, but you'll find it there. Quite easy to find. Johnny Clegg's called The White Zulu. Mine's called White Zulu. And you will find on my website, you'll find all kinds of photographs going way back to when my ancestors settled in the Cape, 1652. Well, not photographs of them, but descriptions. This photograph of my grandmother's wedding, and lovely, lovely photos of the farm we still own. My sister sent me a photograph this morning of the farm in midsummer, and she says how beautiful it's looking. I've had a lot of rain. So, just want to thank my helpers, John and Sean, to thank you all for listening, and also please share this with everybody else. Hit the like button and enjoy. Goodbye.